Hello and welcome to another episode of Chekpoint, the podcast highlighting and telling the stories of influential leaders in and around the sports industry. Today, we are excited to welcome our next guest, Kris McCarthy, to the show. Kris is the co-founder of FanSaves, a couponing platform that offers users discounts and deals from the sponsors and affiliated brands of their favorite sports teams and organizations, which helps increase the sponsorship and advertising revenue for those sports teams. Kris is the former professional hockey player with stops at a couple of different leagues, but most of his career spent in the FHL. He is most noted for his skills when dropping the gloves and doing what hockey players do best, which is why he spent most of his time in the penalty box and is now the fifth-time player in penalty minutes. I can't wait to talk about that. He brings that fight over to the business, which has positioned FanSaves as a premier app, especially with all the shakeup and how advertising is being done in 2020. Kris currently lives in Ottawa, Canada, but for the next 45 minutes, he's here with us on Chekpoint. Kris, welcome to the show. How we doing, my man?
We're doing great, Scott. So happy to be here. Thanks so much for having me on the show with you today.
Awesome. Stoked to have you on. I mean, obviously, FanSaves is doing some amazing things, and with the market being where it is, excited to go ahead and unpack that. But for all you first-time listeners, we're going to take the next 45 minutes and use this as a true checkpoint. We're going to hear Kris's story on how he got here, what he's currently doing with his co-founder Shannon over there at FanSaves, and based on all his perspective and knowledge and experience, where he sees the industry going. So, Kris, as I said, we have a ton to unpack. I can't wait to hear about these fights that you used to get in. Who are you, man? What's your story? Where does it start?
True blue Canadian. I was born in Prince Edward Island on the East Coast and moved to Ottawa with my family when I was 2. I grew up in Ottawa, love the city, the capital of Canada, and then pursued my education in the United States. So I went to SUNY Potsdam in New York, upstate New York, got my business degree my degree in business administration, and also started my 7-year professional hockey career, which you alluded to earlier. So that's what kind of led to founding our startup. And I wouldn't be who I am without the characteristics that I learned from sports. And I wouldn't be the founder that I am today from all of the lessons I learned from playing competitive sports throughout my career.
Yeah, I mean, it's always interesting when we talk about athletes, especially that make it to the professional level. There's a ton of parallels that transition, but when we talk about going from the athletic, rink in your world to the business world, what are some of those, characteristics or those traits that you lean back on from your hockey days that help you when you get into a circumstance like COVID with, growing the business right now?
For sure. Probably the biggest one that I can think of off the top of my head is leadership, right? So throughout my career, I've been really fortunate enough to, be an assistant captain or a captain of multiple teams that I had played for, whether it be, like minor hockey, high school hockey, or even into my professional career. So I took a lot of those leadership qualities from, leading a team of players and working with your coaches and your peers over to the business world. But, also faced a lot of adversity throughout my career. I blew out my knee twice right in the middle of my draft year, which didn't see me get drafted to the OHL, and then eventually not the NHL, which was my dream growing up as a Canadian. Went through surgery and some other injuries throughout my career. So learning from that adversity, knowing that the world's not over, you'll recover and you'll come back stronger. That's something that I really take over to the business life, because throughout the life of our startup, we faced a lot of adversity that we've been able to overcome. And you mentioned the pandemic. That's just another piece of adversity that now we're all dealing with in different ways. But another thing that we're able to overcome. Some other characteristics. Another big one is teamwork, right? You have to be able to work with different people that are from different walks of life and have different stories, and be able to relate to them, but also work towards a common goal. And in hockey, it was winning a championship. And in startup life, it's building a great business. So those would probably be the 3 biggest ones that I've transferred over from my hockey career.
Yeah, it's always interesting, when you talk to athletes, you almost have this parallel of life where there's seasons, you can win, you can lose. And, when I made that transition over into the entrepreneur world, it was like the number one name of the game is to stay in business, right? So as long as we're doing that, we're doing something right. And then, obviously we want to define success as we go through it. Before we jump into the business, right? Because we're going to talk all about that, but I'm curious, right? So you started, grew up in Canada. What was that transition like coming stateside? Talk recruiting process, talk some of the hurdles, challenges, what that experience was like for you.
For sure. I was in grade 11, and I got the opportunity to play up with the level higher than me for the competitive team that I was playing for, and they were in playoffs. So I remember I was super stoked. It was me and a teammate. We were the top two leading scorers on our team. He went on to get drafted by the Ottawa Senators like years later. But that game, I remember that first game, I hit a guy in the corner, and then I started to skate away, and he fell on my knee, and it blew up my knee. Ended up tearing my MCL, my meniscus, fractured my kneecap in 6 places. So that was like my first piece of adversity that I went through. And then I came back the next year, even stronger, hoping to fulfill my dreams of being drafted and playing in the OHL. And I remember like halfway through the season, I was having a really great season. I got kind of hit from behind and my knee twisted, and I ended up tearing my ACL and had to get full reconstructive surgery. So I give that context to get to this point in the story where, playing professional hockey was no longer like a big focus of mine. My next point in life was to get my education. And my parents were really strong on pushing me towards getting that education. So made some highlight reel videos of my career and sent them out to some schools. And I got a reply back from a school in upstate New York called North Country College, a community college that plays in the NJCAA. Had the opportunity to play there a year. And then after that year was over, the coach went to a prep school down the road in Lake Placid, New York. So he brought me along with him. So I went from like college back down to like prep school. I did my postgraduate year, and then after that year was over, I had a few offers to play at some Division 3 schools, but at that time the dollar was really low in Canada, and I just couldn't afford like a $25,000 or $30,000 a year at school. So I went back to home to Canada, played a year at Junior A, hoping that I'd get picked up by a school. And that year actually I was working a couple jobs. One of them was like a Greek restaurant, and I was in the back of the restaurant one day, and the owner, who was also my friend, came in one day and was like, "Hey, guess what? I just bought a hockey team." And I was like, "What?" He's like, "Yeah, a professional hockey team. There's this new league starting called the FHL. It's pretty much in upstate, Eastern America in Canada. And there's a team that's going to be starting at Akwesasne, and I'm the owner, and I want to sign you." So I was like, that's really cool. So I was the second player signed to that team, and I signed my contract in the back of a Greek restaurant, which is a pretty funny story. But from then on, I got to play 7 years professional, and that was the start of my professional career. So really weird how it all happened, but I'm a big firm believer in kind of the universe, and everything happens for a reason. And had I not been injured that first year, my path in life would have been completely different. But I couldn't be happier with where I am today, and it all started with a major knee injury. So
Wow. I mean, talk about resilience, bouncing back, and making the best of a situation. I mean, that's incredible. Now, I'm curious, is there a Greek god for fighting, or is that just sort of something that you just took on as your own? Like, I mean, what were you always this aggressive hockey player? Like, what was it like on the rink? Like, how was that always your identity?
it wasn't really. I mean, like, I'm 6'1", 195, like, a pretty common size, like, hockey player. But, that year I got signed to play my first year. I also got accepted into SUNY Potsdam in upstate New York. So I was literally going to school full time in university classes and driving an hour and a half back to Akwesasne, which is right on the border of Cornwall, Ontario, and Messina, New York. So, I go, like, I make the team. And, I've got players like Pierre Dagenet that played in the NHL for multiple seasons, 30-goal scorer in the NHL, multiple other draft picks. But then we had these other players on the team that were from like this Quebec senior league called the LNAH. And I mean, you can look these guys up. If you've ever seen the movie Les Chiefs, LES Chiefs, they were a team in this league, and they were notorious for being tough, the toughest hockey league in the world, they're branded as. And so we had these like 4 or 5 guys in our team that were just monsters, like beasts. I'm talking like 6'5" plus, like 250, just jacked. And I watched them beat up on so many people. And as a rookie, like if one of our star players got hit, I was expected to kind of like answer the bell and protect my teammates as well, right? So I learned a lot from them and from watching them play. And so that was kind of like I guess the start of like that mindset where it's like protecting your teammates and, working towards a common goal altogether. So throughout my career, like not to say that I was a fighter by any means, I was kind of just like a hard-nosed defenseman that, protected his teammates and wouldn't shy away from dropping the mitts, but racked up quite a bit of penalty minutes throughout my career. But I was never really looked at as like a goon or a fighter. I had my role, and I didn't shy away. So.
I love it. It's funny, before we hopped on here, like I'm a huge Leafs fan. My dad grew up in Toronto, and I had the man, and for all my buddies back in Alabama and Mississippi and everyone that is listening to this, they're like, the Leafs, like, you were a fan of a tree, or what are you talking about? And so but it's funny. I got the chance to meet Darcy Tucker and Ty Domi and some of those guys, and it's amazing, right? Like, because it takes a level of tenacity, grit, and just sort of pure, I'm just going to throw myself at it. And then you meet them, and they're not goons. They're just regular guys that, it's all for the common good. So really, really interesting to sort of hear the person behind someone who's fifth all time in that league for penalty minutes. To see what you're doing now is quite incredible.
I always say that's like my Happy Gilmore like record, that part of the movie where he's like, yeah, I took my skate off once and tried to stab a guy. I'm the only kind of guy to ever do that. And so this is kind of my like story. But yeah, I mean, like there's a code in hockey, and like if it's hard for people outside of the game to really understand. I know there's probably codes in other sports, but for hockey, like if you step outside that line, you better be prepared to answer the bell and like, face the repercussions for your actions, right? Being a cheap or dirty player, a lot of those guys, they tend to get a bad rap for the things they do that are cheap plays, and a lot of guys, the NHL is much different than it was back in the 80s and even the 90s. And it's trickled down to professional sports. Like even the FHL, the league that I started in, is very different now than it was back then. While the quality of hockey was really high, it was a really tough league when the league started about 9 years ago now, 10 years ago. And now it's very skilled. They graduate players all the time to the East Coast Hockey League and higher. So I think the game itself has really changed, but I was a part of that era where it was, really hard nosed and all about protecting your teammates and working towards the common goal. So
super cool, super cool. So now, we're starting to get a sense of who you are, as you're coming up through the hockey ranks. And as we make the transition into, what you're doing post hockey, one of the things that's interesting through a Chekpoint, especially with athletes, is this identity, right? And so a lot of folks have their identity wrapped up in sport. I know I did when, I was playing college football. What was that transition like from hanging up the skates to the professional world for you?
it really didn't happen all at once. I'll kind of keep the story brief, but it was my fourth year playing minor pro. And halfway through the season, the coach and general manager got fired. And at the time, I was the captain of the team. And I remember the owner giving me a call and saying, like, hey, come meet us at this restaurant in town. So I met up with him, and he informed me that the coach and general manager had been fired and that I was going to take over the team as the general manager. So literally running the marketing, the sponsorship, the game day, all the staff, everything. Like I was now responsible for. And to boot, I had to hire a coach. So I ended up promoting one of the players on our team that had played a higher level, who became the player coach. I continued to play as like the player general manager, and I gave away my seat to one of the other veteran players. So before I get into the transition, a funny story. I remember one year we went on the road. That year we went on the road to North Carolina, Winston-Salem, and we were playing a neutral site game because the league wanted to put a team in that city where there is now one. So I remember we played this team, and they told us like, hey, put on a good show. This is a really good market. And we're like, yeah, whatever. We get in there and there's like 5,000 people, like packed stands, like to a neutral site game, which was really cool. So I remember like halfway through the game, like a tussle broke out in front of the net after a whistle. And so I grabbed the guy who ended up being like one of my good buddies on the other team. And then we dropped the gloves. I look over, like my coach is in a fight with one of their players. And then my captain is also in a fight. Like we're in a full blown line brawl at the same time. So I said to myself, that's got to be the first time in professional sports where like the general manager, the coach, and the captain are all involved in a line brawl at the same time. Like that's got to be a record somewhere. That's got to be a crazy statistic. But just funny story about that. But so getting that position, like I was also in university full time, taking business management. I was able to apply a lot of the things I was learning in school over to that position and managing the whole organization. So that after that semester, I graduated. And the next year, new ownership took over the team, and I was made the sales and marketing director. So that was like my start in the front office of sports. And my focus kind of shifted to like, playing hockey and kind of just see where my career takes me after my education to like, what, I would love to work in the front office of like a professional sports team and apply a lot of these things that I'm learning because I'm really passionate about it. And 3 years after that, ended up playing in Cornwall, and I wasn't working for the team. But I got injured behind the net. I broke my finger, and I was out for 10 weeks with finger surgery. So I went to the owner and I said, hey, look, like I've spent time as sales marketing director working for other teams, and we could really use help in ticketing and sponsorship. So he made me the sales and marketing director, and that's when I met Shannon, and together we took over the team, and really breathe some life into it as far as like the marketing and the sales. And then that summer when we were out selling sponsorship, that led to us founding our startup. So it wasn't like, I quit I ended my hockey career one day and I started my business career the next day. It kind of blended together for a few years. And then that 1 year when we were selling sponsorship, we found the pain point to start our business idea. And from there on, I kind of let go of my hockey career and I focused on like our startup. So to answer your question, it was like very difficult at first. I went from like having that team mentality, that family mentality, to being on the other side of it as like, the front office worker and not a part of the team. And that was really hard for me because I had really good relationships with some of the guys, and I had to separate myself from like the player mentality to like, the staff mentality. But starting FanSaves really helped me get through that. And my co-founder was super supportive, and it's just been an amazing ride since. So a lot of guys have really tough transitions. For me, it was a little easier, but still pretty difficult.
Yeah, and as I'm listening to your story, it's really interesting how it pieces together. And if I had to just say one word that I think sums up, a lot of entrepreneurs is opportunistic. And I would say, Kris, as I'm listening to you, it's like you're dealt one hand of cards, and then you make two pair go a hell of a long way, right? And so it's really cool to see like, when I'm given this scenario, what you do with it. And so, I'm sure there's a ton of applicability to that mentality and, obviously scaling a business with the elephant in the room, as you would say, COVID. So I'm curious, right? Let's talk FanSaves now. We know where the idea was built from, you and Shannon, in the front office there, but what has the journey been like for FanSaves and more importantly, working with your partner in crime in life as well? I am really excited to hear that dynamic.
Yeah, definitely. Just to give you a bit of context, I'll further on like my last response. Like we were managing the sales and marketing, we were out selling sponsorship, and we kept running into the same problem where business owners didn't want to sponsor our team because they had sponsored a team in the past and didn't see a lot come back into their store, or they didn't think they were going to get enough out of traditional inventory like a wall sign, an in-ice logo, or their logo in the game day program. They really wanted something more digital. They wanted to be able to track return on investment and collect customer analytics, and we didn't have anything like that. So we kind of put our heads together. We were frustrated. We were like, how can we better activate our fans to engage with our sponsors and drive sales into those businesses, to the businesses that sponsored our team? And that's when we had the idea to create FanSafe. So it's been quite the journey. I'm so blessed to have an amazing co-founder like Shannon, who is so supportive and matches my passion for the business every day. It started off in sports sponsorship, but it really quickly grew into other verticals. Other verticals started to emerge and contact us, such as like chambers of commerce, universities and colleges, events, festivals, esports, influencers. Like all of these different organizations and people, if you will, rely on sponsorship or membership, but have the same problem of not being able to justify ROI to their sponsors outside of vanity metrics. So we're a way that we're actually tracking true conversion, and these brands and organizations can log into their dashboards and in real time actually see true analytics from the users that are engaging with their brands. So.
Wow. Yeah. And I mean, what an innovative and now timely solution, right? So, with every great pandemic or great shakeup to markets, obviously it opens up opportunities for new innovative technology to streamline these processes. So, for our listeners, what is that? What does the last 6 months look like? I mean, are these non-traditional markets continuing to bear fruit for you, or how are you guys doing as a business right now?
Yeah, so we had actually just got back from San Diego on March 4th, and cases were starting to pop up in California, and a week later, everything kind of shut down. All of our partnered organizations kind of halted. All of their sponsors or members kind of closed their doors due to social distancing. So we had a really tough decision to make. We were like, do we just kind of work on strategy and kind of ride this out, or do we go on offense and try to make a play here? And that's what we did. We ended up creating a gift certificate program over Shopify. And by the end of it, we had partnered with 62 communities across Canada and over 625 businesses to promote them and encourage people to buy gift certificates. And we were able to facilitate over $31,000 worth of gift certificates sold in these communities. And all of that money went directly to these small businesses that were really struggling because they had closed their doors to social distancing. So it was super rewarding hearing from some of these small businesses saying like, thank you so much, because of you we were able to like pay our rent, or we were able to pay our hydro bill this month. And we spent a lot of time. We were working 10-hour days throughout the whole pandemic, throughout the 4-month period that we ran this program. So we were really busy. But a byproduct of this like good feel good story and like this philanthropy, if you will, that we were doing to give back, because we couldn't make masks or ventilators. This was our way of giving back to the small business community. A byproduct was we kept our brand relevant. We were featured in like over 35 media articles, and we were able to build some really great relationships with these communities that we were working with, who we had not worked with before. So we were able to build our reputation, build our credibility. So it really worked out. And then as we sunsetted that program, we converted a lot of communities that we were working with over to our core platform. So that's where we are now. And I think one of the biggest things that we've learned out of this whole experience, that was true before, but it's even more prevalent now, is like small businesses are the backbone of our economy, at least here in Canada. I know that's true in the United States as well. And what else we've seen is like, with all of these sporting events that are happening without fans actually in the stands, there's a huge opportunity missed for these teams to be able to promote to their fans, who are not seeing all the in-game activations, all the in-game signage, and all the promotions from their partners. So we're a digital solution that's able to come in and be an inventory option for these teams and organizations, to still promote their sponsors and actually engage and activate their fans with their partner brands. So it's been a big opportunity for us, and we're taking full advantage of it.
And I love that, right? And obviously Chek is, the one putting on Chekpoint, and we're doing the same thing, right? Like, I mean, I'm starting to see a through line with you here. Regardless of what you're dealt, you're going to find a way to go ahead and capitalize and get the most out of every situation. And we know sports right now is traditionally just in a really tough spot, right? Like, I mean, the ad revenue that we're traditionally used to getting in the organizations, which supplements other budgets to make sure that the players and the supporting staff have that professional experience, that's not there right now. And so I think it's really innovative what you guys are doing, both in the sports arena and then, starting to make the impact in the community, which is just unbelievable. So now that we're starting to get to know you, I want to ask a little bit, take a little deeper dive, right? So the entrepreneurial mindset, we're going through this thing together. What has been sort of the biggest challenge, right? We talked about all the optimism that you guys that you've overcome and that you're radiating. What's that challenge that's like, man, we gotta climb this hill, and it's not that easy in the face of the pandemic?
Yeah, I mean, every part of the business life cycle has like different challenges, right? So I'll start off with like our biggest challenge, and then I'll speak to COVID in a second. Our biggest challenge throughout the life cycle of our business has been development. Shannon and myself were not technical co-founders, meaning we didn't code the app ourselves, right? And now it's not just an app. We've got our web app website, which works in tandem with the app. But it took us 4 different tries with 4 different developers or agencies to get to where we are now, where we're fully satisfied with our current developer, who was also out of Ottawa, who's got a team, is fully transparent, has hit every deadline, is very reasonable priced, and works with us and has weekly chats with us to make sure we're getting the most out of our dollars and we're getting the product that we envision, right? So, we always stumble forward. Like, we made mistakes with development. Our first developer built us an MVP. We were able to validate it, but it was a far cry from what we had envisioned. So we moved on. We got an agency involved. They were better, but very low transparency. They worked for major companies, major banks, and we were like a super small fish. So we didn't get the attention that we needed as a startup company. And then we tried a student. We tried bringing another employee in-house to do the dev, and each like stage just had like problems of why it didn't work, or we didn't get what we really were envisioning or at the price. And so now we're finally there where we've got it and we're really happy. But that was probably our biggest struggle, if you will, our biggest challenge to date. But we've been able to solve that problem. So that's something that we speak a lot about as founders. And, at least we didn't lose like IP, or we didn't get taken to the cleaners and spent all kinds. Like, we were able to stumble forward. So I think that's a really important thing. Like, you're going to make mistakes. One, learn from your mistakes, but two, always try to stumble forward and keep progressing your platform. With COVID, it's been more of an opportunity than a challenge, where these organizations are open to finding solutions that can help them promote their corporate partners or their members and help drive traffic into their stores. So the challenge has been, I guess, like, a lot of these organizations have let go a lot of their staff or furloughed their staff. So there's less people that are actually working in the business. So, we have like a turnkey solution that makes it really easier, but we've had to like revamp our whole process to make it even easier for these organizations to implement, because a lot of them still don't have their full-time staff back on board. So that's probably the challenge that I've seen, at least in the sports world.
Yeah, no, that's I mean, look, we can relate to it, and with that challenge comes the opportunity to fill that gap. And I think we're both doing that. And for all you listeners out there, if you take anything from this podcast, one, don't be scared to drop your mitts, and two, fail forward. That is what this whole thing is about. At the end of the day, as we move through the checkpoint, failure is just the key to opening up new opportunities to grow and be successful. And so, Kris, you seem to embrace that mentality and that mantra. So kudos, and that I think it's just big things on the horizon for FanSaves. So as we start to shift the pendulum, outside of the heart of COVID, hopefully there's a light at the end of the tunnel. Where do you and Shannon see the business going over the next few years? And a more pointed question is, where do you see the industry going with advertising as that traditional model continues to evolve?
For sure. With our business, like, we see this becoming a huge, huge platform, right? In the sense that, like, if you try to think right now, if anyone's listening to this program, think of like, who is your favorite professional sports team? Okay, got it. Now, how many sponsors of that professional sports team can you name? We've asked so many sports fans that we've run into throughout these past 3 years, and 95% of sports fans that we've asked that question to can't name more than 3 or 5 of their favorite team sponsors. That's a huge problem when you consider that a lot of these major professional teams have like hundreds of sponsors, and you as a big fan can barely name any of them. So the problem is with retention, saturation. You go to these games, you're oversaturated. So we see FanSaves becoming like the Instagram of sponsorship, almost, if you will. So you can go to our platform, you can follow any of your favorite organizations, sports teams, colleges, influencers, athletes, esports teams. There's so many different verticals that rely on sponsorship, but a lot of people just don't know who those businesses are that support their favorite teams or organizations. So being a one-stop shop where you can not only identify who those brands are that support your favorite team, but actually be able to engage with them with discounts and deals. We see this being a huge, huge platform with all the different verticals that we can support. The industry as a whole, we're going through it right now. It's a huge digital transformation, a revolution, if you will, definitely within the sports age, but also with, like, take the Chamber of Commerce, for example. Up here in Canada, there's big programs, where the federal government has like allocated money for all these different communities to help these brands, these small businesses incorporate e-commerce into their business, right? So many businesses that we worked with through our FanSaves gift certificate program, they didn't have an e-commerce solution, which meant they couldn't like offer gift certificates, or people couldn't buy from their site. But two, they barely even knew how to operate their own social media. So I think we're seeing like that huge like magnifying glass put on e-commerce and social media as a way in like a COVID world to attract customers and actually allow them to engage and purchase things through their business. So not only are we seeing it in the sports world through all of the different sports technologies that are being embraced right now, we're seeing it in other industries and other verticals as well. Chambers of commerce just being one of them.
You bring up the point of fans not knowing their sponsors, and I think that is just I mean, it's mind blowing. And I'm sitting over here listening to you, and I'm trying to rack through my brain like, I don't even know who sponsors our alma mater, and so it's I think as we get more pinpointed with our technology and the ability to address, put it in real time right in front of you, that is, I mean, it's going to open up a world of opportunity for the user experience, both for the sponsor and for the, for the attendee or the fan. Now, I'm curious because one thing that we talk to athletic directors, we talk to organizations, we talk to former players. One of the things that's coming down the pike in sports for the collegiate amateur world is the name, image, likeness. And so when you talk about sponsors to an individual athlete, is that something that FanSaves is addressing or coming up with a solution for?
Okay, let's give a real world example here. LeBron James. I'm going to put you on the spot, Scott. How many endorsers or sponsors of LeBron James can you name?
So I think I can name a couple. Nike being one of them. Maybe just Nike. I don't know. Now that you put me on the spot,
Dozens.
yeah.
He's got dozens of businesses and brands that support him and pay him money to support, like to promote their brand. But he's the most, I'll call him the most high profile athlete in the game right now. And like you and I, like I'm a big basketball fan. I don't know if you are as well, but I mean, at the very least, you should be able to name a few, right? If LeBron James was on FanSaves, you'd be able to go to his page and you'd be able to identify all of the businesses that support him, and you'd be able to engage with them through an e-commerce solution. So you bring that over to name, image, and likeness, right? You've got all these high profile, mostly Division I athletes. Like the lower divisions, they might not get the attention from brands that the higher profile collegiate athletes will get. But you think of like some of those high profile collegiate athletes, and there's just going to be a race. There's going to be a door that's open, and all these brands are going to start filtering in, and they're going to want to support these single athletes that have created a brand for themselves and that have created a following on different social platforms, right? So, with all of these athletes who are now open to be able to be getting endorsed and, to have sponsors, how are you going to know who they are, right? They're going to be promoting them on their Instagram and whatever, but there's no real one-stop shop where you can go and find out who are the brands that support your favorite athlete or organization. And with name, image, and likeness, we're able to be an option for these these amateur athletes to be able to put their own brand up on our platform and push people to their page to actually engage with the businesses that support them. So it's a huge, huge opportunity, and it's definitely something we have on our eye on.
And I think that's it's so cool, right? To think that, as an athlete, you have this platform where you're able to go ahead and support. And, I was talking to a buddy of mine who started a blockchain or a blockchain tech stack for players to be their own agents, right? And so, as you see this model just completely being shifted and turned on its head, being able to track in the city where your sponsorship is really shining may in the future dictate what team you go to, maybe just as much as the coaching staff or some of the other amenities, so that you can capitalize on that investment. So really neat to get, a peek underneath the hood and see not only what you guys are doing now, but some of the future installments where this, where FanSaves, the platform, can really start to come to life. So, we'll use that bridge for future facing things, Kris. I'm really curious, beyond name, image, and likeness, is there anything else on the roadmap that is worth mentioning to the listeners of where you see the industry and FanSaves going?
Esports is like a major emerging industry. billions and billions of dollars. It's set to grow exponentially over the next like handful of years. So, all of these teams are being created. They each have individual players. I can't even tell you. Like I went to this event about this time last year. It's called EGLX in Toronto, and Luminosity was the team that was there. They're out of Vancouver. They're really well known. And I'm watching these like 10-year-olds sign autographs, and these people are like flocking to them and like taking pictures. I'm like, oh my God, these are 10-year-olds. Like, that's crazy. But like, this is the future of esports. And not that they're all 10 years old, but like, my point is like, they have individual brands themselves. They all have their own team that they like are a part of. And those teams and those individual athletes are going to be looking for ways to, promote their endorsements and their partners or sponsors, if you will. So it's just an enormous industry that's growing so quickly. There's so much innovation that's happening in that space. So that's just one vertical for us that we're really like keeping our eye on. Name, image, and likeness is another one. Sports, chambers, like there's a lot of big verticals, but I think esports is a really big one, especially because it's still in its infancy stages as far as like growing as an industry, and it's just beginning to get the attention that it deserves. So yeah, to answer your question, I think esports is a huge one for sure.
And I second the notion there, because we talk to commissioners from leagues, we talk to athletic directors, and the attention is not as much on the traditional realm of sports, but now of, hey, if we have to be siloed off or we need to be in a digital environment, how can we take this model that once worked and now move it over into the evolution of sport? And I don't know if you saw this, but Nike came out with a chair. You sit in it. I mean, the thing heats up, like, when you're warming up, it cools down. It's got vibrations on it. I mean, they're making it a fully immersed environment with augmented reality. I mean, I'm not a gamer myself, but these things keep evolving like that. You might find me in one of those chairs here sooner than later.
Yeah, for sure. Like there's like whole conferences of university athletics that now have like an esports league, right? To call it the ECAC being one of them. So they've got their own like esports league, and there's a few other ones. The NJCAA has one as well. But it's almost like every day there's a new like school that's adding to that league. And then up here in Canada, in Ontario, there's a league starting, and they've already got over 25 member universities or colleges that are going to be playing in these few different games. So I'm actually in the middle of this between these two organizations, and I'm trying to bridge the gap. And there's talk about like an international event where like the best of Canada esports and collegiate athletics plays the best of American collegiate athletics and esports, and they come together for almost like a Can-Am tournament. So that's never been done before. Like that's really cool. To just see that, but to be a part of it, it's really cool. It's brand new, right? So yeah, there's just so much opportunity out there, and it's just all happening so fast. So being able to keep your finger on the pulse of what's happening is so important because it's changing daily.
Is that where the Olympics are going, Chris? Is this what we have to look forward to in the, I guess I'd say the future, but I mean, hell, we're living in the future, it feels like. So we're closer to the Jetsons than we are the Flintstones, my man. So, that's really, really interesting insight there, especially from someone who's more acutely familiar with the advertising and some of the business models that live behind the sport there. So, really interesting Chekpoint. This has been a great conversation. So we're going to put FanSaves to the side. We're going to ask a couple personal questions just to get to know you a little bit better. So working with your girlfriend, being the co-founder, as an entrepreneur, living in the same house with my wife sometimes and working just to be, we get at each other's throats. So I'm really curious, what has that experience been like, for the both of you guys?
It's been really great. I mean, like my biggest knock, I would say, is sometimes it can be hard to separate the business from the relationship. Like sometimes we have a disagreement about the business, and because we're so passionate about it, we're both so passionate, it creates a disagreement, and then there's like a bit of friction. But at the end of the day, we always have to remember that this is not like you and I fighting like, oh, I hate you, oh, I hate you. Like, no, this is like a disagreement about the business, which is a good thing because we're so passionate. We want the best for the business, right? So trying to separate that from like our relationship outside of the business is really hard because it's so intertwined, and like we travel and like we meet all these people, and it's all intertwined, right? So that would be the biggest knock, I'd say. But generally when we have a problem with the business and we just cannot like come to an agreement, we kind of put it on the shelf And then we go to our advisory board and we say, hey, can you guys help us break the tie here? And then we move on from that. But I think it's really propelled our business. I think it's really rare to find dating co-founders. We've been together for 3 years. We talk about the business all the time. Like we wake up in the morning, we're like, okay, what's in the schedule? Oh, I had this dream last night. I have this idea. And we'll go to bed talking about it. Like, oh, I can't believe that person did this. Or, oh, I had this great meeting. Like, remind me tomorrow. So we're always progressing the business in a sense because we're always brainstorming and feeding off of each other. But the really great thing too is we both have different skill sets, right? So her skill set complements my skill set and vice versa. She has a degree in broadcast journalism and she's an excellent writer. I'm more of the biz dev guy. I love reaching out, making connections and doing podcasts and, getting us into competitions and making sales. So we have different skills that complement each other, but ultimately bring us together for the common good of the business. So
it is impressive. And I tell folks, we just talked about this on your show, but I went out on a road trip for 5 months in an 11-foot travel trailer, and I told anybody before you get married, you have to go and do something that puts you and your partner outside of your comfort zone so you can understand how you react in those adverse situations, or if you're able to separate the business from the personal. And kudos to you guys. I think it's just another great accomplishment on top of FanSaves, and it should provide hope for a lot of entrepreneurs to say, if you're able to go through life with this partner, why not spin up a business and take that same passion and build something for yourself? So really, really commendable. Love what you're doing. And so, as we start to wind down here, one of the questions, Kris, that we've been asking all of our guests that have come on is to share some wisdom. And so if you could tell the listeners one thing that you've done in your life that you would recommend they do or experience in theirs, what would that be and why?
So many. I would say, I'll pull from my experience in my life, overcoming adversity, right? Adversity is going to happen. It comes in different forms. It comes at different times. Just being able to overcome that adversity, expect it, and be able to deal with it and move on. Another thing I would say is don't be afraid to fail. So many people, I think I mentioned earlier, have ideas, but they just don't act on it for whatever reason. Oh, I don't have the money to start a business, or, oh, I don't have the time right now. You see mom entrepreneurs killing it. You see people that have slept in their car for years that, start a business and become wildly successful. So throw all those excuses out the window, start your business, start your idea, be passionate about it and rock it out. Don't be afraid to fail and learn from every mistake. And as I mentioned earlier, try to stumble forward and fail forward. So those would be my 2 key points.
Spoken like a true entrepreneur, a true athlete. Kris, this has been an unbelievable Chekpoint. For all the guests to go out and, or if they want to get in touch with you and learn more about FanSaves from a user level, from an organization level, where can they meet you on social, or what platforms are you available on so they can learn more?
Super active on LinkedIn. You can find us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, pretty much any social platform out there. But for me, I'm most active on Twitter and LinkedIn. LinkedIn is an incredible resource. So I'm always open to chat and learn from other people. But if you're an entrepreneur out there, reach out. I'd love to engage. If you're an organization that could utilize our platform, I'd love to hear from you as well. So.
Awesome. Well, guys, this is wrapping up another episode of Chekpoint. Kris, we love what you're doing. Thank you so much for coming on the show and just dropping nuggets of wisdom from just a little bit north of us. And for all you listeners out there, I highly encourage you start to listen and digest this, and most importantly, check yourself. Kris, thanks so much for coming on the show, man.
Thanks so much for having me, Scott. It's been fun.